this loophole in the tax code, and this particular loophole is called carried interest. And basically, if you earn your living, let me back up. Let me give you the big picture here, the historical perspective on this. Because this is where I think that Republicans are starting to wake up. And the proof of this is what happened with the Manchester Union leader. Up until 1921, whether it was the income tax that Abe Lincoln put into place to pay for the Civil War, or whether it was the income tax that came into place in 1913 or 1916 or thereabouts, whenever we had taxes in this country, income taxes, regardless of how you earned your income, you paid the same tax rate. And the top tax rate in 1921 on people who earn their income by the sweat of their brow or the sweat of their arm, you know, whether they were out, digging up streets or building railroads, or whether they sat in an office and did bookkeeping, however they earned their living, or if they earned their living as a capitalist. In other words, by loaning people money or investing in businesses and then getting a return from that investment. Capitalists earn their living with capital rather than with labor. Most people think that small business people are capitalists. They're not, typically. They're actually entrepreneurs. There's a difference. I've started and built up over my lifetime 7 businesses, 5 of them quite successful. I'm not a capitalist and never have been because I don't make my living off capital. Every single one of those businesses, we basically started from scratch, either with our own money or with, in one case, with a $10,000 line of credit from American Express. They were the capitalists, arguably. So anyhow, what happened in 1921 was President Harding was elected in the election of 1920. Republican. And the first of 3 Republican presidents over the next 12 years. Harding in 1920, the election of 20 to the election of 24, I guess it would have been. And then Coolidge, 24 to 28. And then Hoover, 28 to 32. Okay. These 3 Republicans. And Harding's campaign slogan was less government in business, more business in government. I'm not making this up. Go back, Google Harding, and this was his campaign slogan: less government and business, more business and government. In other words, let's run the business, let's run the government like a bit. Have you heard this song before? And one of the things that one of the conclusions he came to was that while it was fine to have a 68%, as I recall, tax rate for people who earn their living, after they've made. I mean, it takes a hell of a lot of income to hit the point where you're actually starting to pay that tax rate. And you don't pay that tax rate on the first X that you earn, but, after Y, then you start paying that tax rate. That was okay for people who actually work for a living. But if you earn your living as a capitalist, your maximum income tax rate should be 25%. So he invented this capitalist gains tax rate that basically didn't exist before then, where he said, people who are wage earners, they're going to pay a higher tax rate, but people who are capitalists, people who largely fund Republican campaigns like Harding's, they'll pay a much lower tax rate, income tax rate. And we have had that capitalist gains tax rate with us ever since 1921. And ironically, the only time that it's been equal to the income tax rate was for about a year during the Reagan administration, when the capitalist gain tax rate was at 28%, and Reagan dropped the labor income tax rate from 74% down to 28%, so they were both at 28%. Well, that didn't last very long. Reagan realized he'd made a huge mistake. He raised the labor tax rate back up, and during the Clinton administration, the capitalist income tax rate dropped down to 15%, which is where it is right now. And carried interest is considered one of those capitalist gains forms of interest. So there's this guy, Steven Schwartzman, who's worth about $5 billion, $4.7 billion, who's sponsoring a fundraiser for Mitt Romney because he says raising the tax rate on carried interest from 15% up to the 36% that the people who work for him have to pay, his bookkeeper has to pay, his janitor has to pay, is the same thing as the Nazis invading Poland. I'm not making this up. And this guy is holding a fundraiser for his fellow venture capitalist, Mitt Romney.